Good afternoon, everyone. It is the afternoon, but as you probably can tell around me right now, these are unusual circumstances for me to be out photographing. The Isle of Skye, for those that don't know, has incredibly long days in summer. Right now it's starting to get to blue hour by about 11:15 at night, and the sun is rising by, well, the good part's about 3:30 in the morning. So the chances of having that perfect point and being awake are quite slim. So I figured I'd come out and challenge myself in conditions again that are less than ideal. But there are a few things that are going to make today that little bit easier to balance them highlights against them dark shadows and just the massive contrast you get with midday light. So even though the conditions aren't really on my side, there's a few things that are going to make today's photography that little bit easier, and the first of all is the clouds. Because they are so thick and there is so many of them, I'm getting this beautiful dappled light just travelling across the mountains. Look at this band of lovely light travelling up them green banks straight up into the cliffs up on top. And these are a couple of the things that are going to really help the photography today. Also, we have had a lot of rain recently, so all of the river levels are back up, which is great because everyone knows that I like photographing rivers. I love to have mountains and water. There's just something about the contrast between the textures. It just really gets me going. And look around. What is there not to like about a location like this? But I'm going to keep on walking in a little bit further and see what I can create. I was down here a couple of days ago and I saw some really nice possible compositions, but the weather was absolutely wild. I managed to capture one image and I'll show you that now. But yeah, I'm going to head in a little bit further and see if things are working out a little bit better. I've got a good feeling about today. The conditions are not ideal, but for the weather and for the time of day, they're pretty good. They are pretty good. So fingers crossed for today. Absolutely. Let's see what happens. I think I have rediscovered an old composition, and it's a composition I really like, and I'll show you why. But before I show you why, I'm going to show you the image that I captured before, which was mind-blowing conditions, and it looks like it was easily faked, and it could be, but it wasn't. It was a true image. I took it myself, I promise and I swear. But wait until you see this composition. So it is plain and simple what I love about this composition, and that is the way this river snakes through this beautiful green grass, and all of this heather has decided to grow along the banks of this river, and it just esses so perfectly and beautifully towards the mountains up here, and it's just awe-inspiring. Just look at the size of their mountains with the moody, dramatic clouds above it, with that dappled light on the surface. It's just absolutely incredible, and it is well worth an image. So I'm going to get set up. So I've not actually fired off a shot yet, but I'm going to talk you through my setup. So polarizer on the front, just because I feel like it just helps the colours a little bit more. Coming around to the back, I've just manually focused on the mountain, and I've got it on 1/40 of a second, f11, ISO 64. I'm going to fire that off, and boom. It looks really dark on the back of the screen, but once I've got this into Photoshop, and it's going to look incredible, absolutely mind-blowing. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to sit and I'm going to wait to see what that dappled light does, because I've got so many clouds, the light's moving in different places around my mountain. And if I get the light in the right place, it's going to make such a difference to the composition, such a difference to the final image. So I've got my settings all dialed in now. The shutter time might switch a little bit depending, but it is going to look absolutely beautiful. I didn't expect to get such a strong composition so soon. So while that time lapse was going, I decided to do a long exposure, and I'm going to talk you through my process of doing long exposures and a few little tips and hints, and hopefully a useful app for those that haven't already bought it. So the first thing I like to do is get the correct exposure of the back of my camera. This is Photopils, an incredibly useful app, especially for landscape photographers. So the first thing I do is I get the information off the back of my camera once I've got a correct exposure, something I'm happy with, and I type it in. So I've got my f-stop here, my shutter time, my ISO, and these are here. And then what I do then is I put in how many stops of light I am stopping on the front of my camera. So I've got a 10 stop on, and then I've got a polarizer, and then I've got a graduated ND filter on. And I'm guessing that equates to about 12 stops of light. And that gives me an estimate of 1 minute 42 seconds. And I've already done a test shot and that worked really, really well. So I'm going to stick with that 1 minute 42. So before I take the image, the first thing I like to do is make sure my filters are still nice and clean. I come to the back of my camera and I make sure my viewfinder is either covered or closed. Luckily enough, on my camera I can close my viewfinder, and then I set my camera onto the double dash mark, which basically means that it will carry on shooting as long as I tell it to. So it goes all the way up 30 seconds to bulb, but I don't have a light rig to do it, and then into this mode. So now that I've got my camera set correctly, I've got my 2-second timer on, so I fire that off and then just press start. And once it gets down to 0, I gently walk across my camera and just press the shutter button. And then hopefully I've got a beautiful image. I'm just going to leave my camera there, shooting away, and then start thinking about heading to hopefully an even better location. So I've packed my camera up and I'm going to head down to the river, and this is the reason why I've decided to wear some wellies today. It is much nicer walking in boots or even shoes, but I know how boggy the ground at Sligachen can be. Sometimes it can be as far as waist deep, and if so, these wellies are not going to do me any favours. But let's see what we find down by the river. So I've been walking around for quite a while now, and I seem to have annoyed some birds. I must be getting pretty close to where they've nested, but the problem is I'm a little bit lost and I can't really get out of where I've got to. But I have found a lovely little area, absolutely beautiful little area with lots of almost swampland. Absolutely beautiful, but these birds keep diving at me which is slightly more intimidating than you probably imagine. I think they've given up, thank God, because that was starting to get stressful. But check out this swampland that I found. There he goes again, bombing at me. I don't want their eggs. I've got no interest in their eggs. Just here photographing. I wish I could tell them. But the challenge now is to find a composition. Absolute challenge. There are so many little waterways everywhere, so many little possibilities, each one of them giving different things. It's not the cleanest, there is a lot of noise going on, but I think it's pretty beautiful. I've got a section of water big enough to have the triangle of the reflection of the mountain in here. I've got this little bit of water coming in from the left hand side. Now if only this little island wasn't there, it's a massive distraction. So maybe I'll shoot nice and low like this, so it looks like that's almost connected to the other landmass there. But I think this might be a beautiful composition. So I'm not trying to copy Thomas Heaton, but I have set up with a 4:5 crop. And the reason why is because I just think it was too long, so I've shortened the image by putting a 4:5 on. It's slightly narrow, but it's mainly shorter because I am shooting in portrait. And it's working out really well in portrait. I've centralized the mountain, sorry them birds again. I've centralized the mountain, I've leveled it off, and I've got a little bit of the water running in, got the perfect triangle, mirror imaging the mountain, that's centralized, and it looks beautiful. So 1/20th of a second, L10, F11, firing it off. Boom. I think that is a really nice image, but I think a long exposure would make this so much better. So I'm going to get set up, do my calculations, type that into photopils, and then get a nice long exposure. When I'm doing my long exposures, obviously I use two filters. First of all, make sure they're clean, because once they're on the system, it's almost impossible to keep them clean. So there we are, nice and clean. And I always stack my 10 stop in first. The reason why, on the back of the filter, it has this little foam pad to sort of stop light from bleeding through, and I think that's really important to put that one on first. Then I'm going to put my medium soft edge graduated filter on just in front, just like so, and I'm going to bring that all the way down so it's as dark as it physically can be, so I can get as long exposure as possible. So I've got my information now all dialed in, and it's giving me a 1/20th of a second for that exposure. So that means it's going to be a 3:25 exposure. So that is going to be pretty long, which should give me some really nice results. And right now I have got some beautiful dappled light. So I finished my exposure, my 3 minutes odd exposure, and on the back of the camera it looks pretty sweet. Don't get me wrong, I would love it if there was colour in the sky and there was dramatic and, you know, that thing that I like to photograph quite often. But the days are so long here So if I'm always waiting for them opportune moments, them perfect moments, I never actually really get much photography done, which is a massive shame. So I decided to come out today, and it was a little bit of an experiment, and I'm pretty happy with the results that I managed to capture, even though I have been getting dive bombed by blooming birds. Blah. But I can understand why they're worried, carrying a big tripod around. Anyway, I'm getting distracted. I think this is going to be the end of my vlog. I'm going to have a walk back to the car and start getting ready for work tonight. I hope you have a lovely weekend, and yeah, give me a thumbs up, hit that subscribe button if that's something you want to do. I am going to be posting lots more content, got so many more ideas on the Isle of Skye, and yeah, I'll see you next time.